So international law or no international law, we're talking about the basic law, we're talking about the NPCSC's interpretations and decisions. Thirdly, that the Hong Kong government does not agree with the HRC's interpretation, which calls into question why it doesn't agree and on what legal grounds that disagreement would matter in the eyes of the Hong Kong government. And fourthly, that the ultimate aim, nonetheless, this is an academic debate, because the ultimate aim, nonetheless, is to achieve double universal suffrage. There are four quick replies to these four quick responses. The first thing is this: yes, the system in Hong Kong may be suited to Hong Kong's circumstances, but remember, General Comment number 25 says you can have any system you want as long as it's a one-person, one-vote system. Secondly, saying that the NPCSC's interpretations and decisions are legally controlling, saying that the basic law is legally controlling, is true. But nonetheless, domestic law cannot excuse a violation of international law. You can't say you get to torture people. If you wanted to say that, this is purely hypothetical, I'm not drawing a connection with any particular country in the world. You can get to torture people because we've passed a law requiring me to torture people. You can't say that. That's not a sufficient excuse in international law. Hence the significance of the third argument, that simply put, the Hong Kong government does not agree with the Human Rights Committee. But why? Why does it disagree with the Human Rights Committee? The Hong Kong government has not furnished sufficient legal arguments here. If I were the Hong Kong government, if I were paid to advise the Hong Kong government, and I've been paid to advise various governments at different times in my life, I would say your argument should look something like this. You do not accept the legal authority of the Human Rights Committee to pronounce on the scope or the validity of your reservation. And this essentially is what the Human Rights Committee is trying to do. Now, if that doesn't sound very convincing, you then say, I would cite the statements made by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the United Kingdom. I would cite the position of the State Department. I would cite the position of France. All three have protested against the powers of the Human Rights Committee in those terms, and now you are in good company. But we would still need the Hong Kong government to tell us that, to spell out its objections clearly, because the next question we'll ask is this: what other reservations do you have to the powers of the Human Rights Committee? And the ultimate question, does Hong Kong really accept the ICCPR as much as we would like to think? Are we as civilized as we would like to think we are? And finally, the ultimate aim is universal and equal suffrage. Is the word aim different from the word right? Because all the Human Rights Committee is saying is that you have a right to equal universal suffrage. What the government seems to be saying is that it is simply an aim. Now finally, Professor Ramchur mentioned this as well. I actually wrote a very long paper for Gladys. I just have never shown it to her. I made this point about, and Professor Ramchur made this point as well, about whether there is a general right to democratic governance in international law today. There may be. It's not very firm. I'm going to proceed on the basis that it's a maybe yes, maybe no kind of situation. But many scholars have pointed out that essentially when you look at treaty reservations, a treaty reservation cannot excuse you from a general rule of international law which exists. It can excuse you from the treaty. From the point of view of treaty law, whether you're looking at treaty law as defined by a pretty old decision of the International Court of Justice called the Genocide Reservations case, or you're looking at the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which I would think Hong Kong accepts as reflective of general rules of international law anyway, your reservation doesn't work if it violates the object and purpose of the treaty. The disadvantage that Hong Kong is in is that since the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, it requires everybody in the treaty to decide that not only do they not like your reservation, because they don't like your reservation, you are actually not a party to this treaty. The Vienna Convention requires all the other parties of the ICCPR to be unanimous in their view that because they don't like your reservation, you should not be a party to this treaty. You are never going to achieve that as part of your attempt to persuade anybody about universal equal suffrage in Hong Kong, because no country is in the business of making enemies with another country on the basis of some purported human right, with grand exceptions on a very grand scale when that happens from time to time. So what are we left with? Well, we're left with a number of things. What do human rights do? They change the domestic political opportunity structure. They give you arguments which you otherwise would not have. They give you leverage internally and externally, which you otherwise do not have. And within the ICCPR system, if you're talking about the treaty reporting system, something I've been spending the last 2 days talking to the Cambodian Senate about, you're looking at a process that relies on persuasion for its success, relies on acculturation for its success. That's all I really want to say about this. Thank you very much.